I'm actually quite honored to start this kind of atelier. They told me that atelier is the right word, like in France, right? Anyway, this parallel session that we have in the upcoming next couple of hours. This happens by chance, actually, because as you know, my name is Alex Pellacani. I'm Director General from the University of Trento, but in this moment also, I'm the chair of the association Humane, which is actually the same of CoDAU on a European level. So by chance, when we talked with Scuteri, when we designed the organization of this annual conference, we decided that this could be a good opportunity. It's the first time, so it's actually kind of an experiment. Please feel free, come in. It's also not easy to organize some speakers from foreign countries to come here attending Italian-speaking presentations, but they are very flexible and understood the issue and the mission, actually, to be here. So then I come to you later while I will introduce you. So this was a nice opportunity and at the same time experiment, as I said, and I look forward to repeat this kind of experiment even in the upcoming years, because I think it's a good idea to open ourselves also on an international level. And why not? It's actually the second thing that happened by chance, exactly this year, while the themes are cooperation and competition. So why not discussing these kind of issues also with our foreign colleagues? First of all, can you, Geoff, please help me to switch this here? And, no, it's fine. So just before we start introducing the themes of today, let me just bring you a couple of information about Humane. So Humane, as I said, I have the privilege to chair in this moment, is the European version, let's say, of CoDAU, as well as we have other national associations in other countries. So nothing really original, but our goal is to network, to share experiences. And of course, we all know that every country, every institution might have his own specification, might have legal and national specification, higher rotation systems are different. We know that, but the issues and the challenges that we are all faced with are pretty much the same. So the goal today is not to copy someone other's experience, but just to understand how other experiences could be useful for our upcoming challenges, for our common challenges that actually, as we heard in many of the presentation and contributions today and even yesterday from the ministry, needs to be faced with another approach, I think, and with a collaboration and collective approach. So in these exercises, we do a lot of things. We do more than just organizing events for professional development programs, summer school, winter school. I have here some slides in which I want to underline some of those. We are actually this week running as probably some of you know already, the summer school in Berlin. In March, we have the winter school. And in October, I don't know if Andrea is here, maybe he's coming later, we organize in Turin our autumn seminar, which has the focus on the HR area, so the talent management, which is at the same time very crucial and critical. I'm sure you already, and you all know the issue, and we have in our recruiting processes. So it's actually sold out, so it's a success story. Let's see how we will discuss the points. Today, unfortunately, we cannot in the position to follow. We have another session about HR management with the Deloitte report, as you know. So the theme is common. So as I said before, everybody is struggling with the same issues. So we are in 2026. Humane is starting also a new initiative, a very new one, a brand new one, which is a kind of strategic professional leadership. We do it partially remotely and partially face-to-face. So we have this event is split in 3 different moments, and we have 1 week face-to-face in Rome, but then we have 2 different experiences remotely, and with the goal to help our professionals or those that should become senior manager of higher education institution to grow up stronger with their competences and capabilities. We're actually still deciding the contents of the next annual conference, but I just tell you that in June of next year, we were in Finland, in Helsinki. Next year we will be in Edinburgh, so I'm pretty much looking forward to have this new event in next year, and I'm sure it will be well organized because the higher education institution of Edinburgh is quite proactive and always is guaranteeing a very excellent content. Even this is not really original. In CoDAU, we know it very well. We try to group some specific competencies in order to share between institutions across Europe on a specific item. So we just launched this kind of activity this year. I'm not yet in a position to tell you the results, but actually the enthusiasm that the specific group leaders showed me and us at the board sounds like very interesting and promising. So let's see. A short reminder, as long as I said, Humane Association is not only training opportunities or the opportunity to see or visit another university, but also much more. And between this much more, we run also a specific survey that we do on a 2-year basis. And so if someone of you needs still to reply, please do. This could help in elaborating better result in the report that will be then absolutely transferred to everybody. So the themes of today in talking about coopetition in our internationalization processes has different stories, different case studies, and it's difficult to find, let me say, the way to summarize all the different experiences around Europe. So we try to pick up some of those experiences. And the first example, which is actually related to the University of Helsinki, is because Helsinki and Finland specifically throughout the years, and the speaker will explain you later, experienced a lot of issues through the road, to the recruital path. So they had to face budget cuts, as we all do. They have some mergers, they have some different extraordinary operations within their institution, in their ecosystems. It's a country with 5 million people, so it's northern situation specific. Let's see what Asa will explain later. So this is one point of view. Another point of view is presented by Cécile. She's former head of administration of Toulouse University, but she's also, her professional experience and CV is very rich because she has a lot of roles within the government and regional and national policymakers. So she's bringing up her experiences not from only from an institution point of view, individual institution point of view, but from a system point of view. And she was kind to bring up the experiences that France decided to run in funding for excellence, in ecosystems, in ways that the French government decided to put in action on a top-down actually approach to trying to give a response to the market and to the issues that have been faced up during the years. Of course, France is more similar than Italy, but again different from management of the higher education system. You remember last year once we organized the bilateral session with their association, some of those aspects came up. We don't turn back to that appointment, but we come specifically to explain how in this country cooperation, collaboration has been managed so far, and which are the pros and cons as usual in these kind of things. UK is a very broad environment. We have here an experience of the University of Leicester, and his registrar is here and trying to focus more on, not more on the governance or on the institution, but more on the way to manage shared services, and in this case, how this could be possible. Last but not least, Professoressa Lippiello is representing the situation that probably most of you know best, because he will talk about the way we run the project that has been addressed by the Next Generation EU program, PNRR, and also in this case we will have some critical aspect that we need to be managed now, and even yesterday there was part of the discussions we already have. So these are the teams that we try to split in these specific experiences. If you agree, I will handle this very informal, so my idea is that everybody, the speaker, I will come immediately to them to introduce them, should be 10, 15 minutes. We can make some questions. I think if you have some clarification questions, just stand up your hand and ask. We discuss immediately, not wait until the end of the presentation, okay? So let's make it more interactive if you want, if you agree. And otherwise, we organize also some more generic questions that at the end of the 4 presentation will be addressed as well. So I start with the Professor Lippiello. All of you knows who she is. She's a rector of Foscari and at the same time delegate of the international affairs of the CRUI. I promise she will not present in Chinese though. So, right? So we are still there. Okay. This is good news. Cécile, I already, okay, Cécile, we know each other 15 years, but so I know you're still from Toulouse, but anyway, I already mentioned that your characteristic, your positive thing is that you were in the position to experience also different point of view, and this is helpful for us to trying to change the point of view on how we used to address issues and used to analyze issues. So thank you for bringing that experience in your presentation, and we will see later on in which kind of comments that will be done. Geoff is registrar, because this is another difference. In every country we have different ways to define head of administration. But anyway, registrar of the University of Leicester. He has a very long experience in the UK higher education sector. So I ask all the speakers to introduce the presentation, whatever the argument is, also to give some national context in order that you can understand eventually some differences between our system. And this will be done also by Geoff, even though he is, as long as he's very deep experienced in shared services and professional services, we ask him to give his point of view from this point of view. Hamalainen is the boss of the University of Helsinki. We know each other from a long time, and I have the honor to see a lot of presentation that he made in, he's the former president of Humane as well, so I got the opportunity to hear a lot of experiences about Finland and about the University of Helsinki. Of course, today his goal is not to present all the story, but be more focused on the specific arguments that we have chosen. But I'm very honored and pleased that all of you are here today and helping us to make it as interesting as possible in giving you some insights. So that's it. And if someone has a question, as long as you know we are online, please come out and use this mic, okay? So everybody can hear here and also from remote. So the first presentation I would like to start with is those of Finland. So Esa, is your turn. If you turn back to the console here, let me see.
So you have a pointer. Yeah. But then I also need to see. So you want to see? No, perhaps we change.
So, let's first check. Can you hear me there back? Also in the back? Okay, great. Just want to see how this mic is working. So, it's great to be here in Italy and Milan talking to you about Helsinki and Finland, and also share some of the experiences that we have had with collaboration and competition, what it looks like from the kind of a small country point of view. I have a couple of slides which I'm going to use as a reference to that what I'm saying, but I'm not going to go through all the details in some of the slides. So then if you want to ask of a specific topic there, then please, I can also elaborate, obviously, on them. I said Finland is a small country. Geographically, we are not, of course, small because we are around 1,200 kilometers from south to north. I think is it the 5th largest country in Europe nowadays, but we are only 5 million people. And here in this slide, basically, you see the current situation of the higher education sector. So we do have around 35 higher education institutions, but we have a dual system. So there are universities where you have research and doctoral education, and then you have universities of applied sciences where you have basically the bachelor degrees. And as you can see, with 5 million people, 35 higher education institutions, it means that the system is actually quite fragmented. From the point of view of this presentation, what is important is that it's not always been like this. So 15 years ago, and maybe 15 years ago, we had around 45 higher education institutions, almost 50, and there have been a lot of mergers ongoing among the universities. So many of the universities have merged, and then many of the universities of applied sciences have emerged among themselves. In Helsinki, at the University of Helsinki, we have not done that because we are a big university, basically the only kind of a big university in Finland. And in Finland, big means that we have 30,000 students and around 8,000, 9,000 staff members. The sector is divided also in the sense that universities of applied science, they are a company form, so they are with limited liability, and it means that they have shareholders. Shareholders typically have been traditionally municipalities, but sometimes also some associations that have established them back in history. So when they then been merging, there has obviously been kind of a financial aspect to this, how you merge through. So it's not only education merging, but it's also financially the companies in a way merging. With the universities, then on the other hand, there are two kinds of universities. Two of them are... Sorry? Volume of the mic, or should I have it closer? Is it better now? Okay. Do I have to start from the beginning? No? Okay. The universities, then on the other hand, there are two that are foundations, so they follow the foundation, private law foundations, and then 11 of us and my university also are autonomous and independent public organizations, so we are not state authorities, none of us. What is also important to understand in the current situation is that we don't take any tuition fees, and all the money, the bulk grant, basically comes from the state. And then, of course, research funding, it comes as an external money. With the universities, that's a big share, and with the universities of applied science, of course, they don't do research, so for them it's more kind of industrial collaboration. One final thing from this slide, perhaps, to say is that now the state steers all of us, so we have annual, every 4 years, we have a negotiation with the state, and then we get money based on the resource allocation model. So it's a kind of mathematical formula where you count how many degrees you have produced, how many articles you produced, and so on. And based on that, then the universities get shared the money that's reserved for university sector, and then the same goes also with the universities of applied science. But there are basically two, you could say two leagues in a way competing with each other about the money. Then when the topic now is on where is the competition and where is the collaboration, I put up 2 slides with lists of things where I feel that there is competition in the system, and then where we do kind of do collaboration. The basic question all the time is that will we have also in the future a dual system? So the universities of applied science want to do research, and they want to have doctors, and they want to have master's degrees. And then, of course, universities are saying that no way, we don't want you to come and kind of take the money that's now reserved for the research-intensive universities. So every time we have kind of political elections, this topic always arises, and it obviously, it doesn't only mean that the universities are fighting against each other for the money, but then it's also the systems are basically kind of confrontational, at least in some points. What is also typical is that the money is, of course, public money is going down, and that's happening in everywhere in Europe, and that, of course, leads to a lot of kind of optimization issues, as how do I actually guarantee that our activity gets more of the money. One thing that's not here mentioned is that there is a kind of a strong political or political steering is getting stronger, and it means then that, of course, when the money goes down, the competition also gets harder and harsher. We have around 40%, oh, still? Can you now hear me? I'm sorry, soon I'm going to swallow this microphone. So then, of course, there is the growing intake of students. Like we don't have free entrance to the university, so we take students only through entrance exams or how they've done the baccalaureate in the school. So it means that now we negotiate then always with the state. If we take more students, the state wants us to take students, but they don't want to give the money. And obviously then the universities are kind of in the situation that who is going to expand, and will they then get more degrees and therefore gain more money in 5 years' time in the more resource allocation model. So there's a kind of a complicated competition game ongoing in that sense. Demographic reasons are typical everywhere in Europe. I don't go perhaps now in detail there. I only say one thing, that when you see Helsinki here and then you take a couple of those blue dots there, that's around 25-30% of the 5 million people. And then when you take 10 of the blue there, you get, no, not even 10, you take 6 of those, and I think you have already half of the Finnish population there. So it shows that the demographically, basically, people are going to the south, and then at the same time the educational system is scattered around, and that of course causes a huge tension in the demography. So growing and shrinking, it's a mistake there from my side. It's not countries, it's regions. So there are growing regions and there are shrinking regions. Then I move to the next part so that I keep my time. As I said, the funding model for block grant is a big competitor, and we are complaining all the time that the state wants to get more degrees, and as you get money only for the output, the state can kind of cut money and still expect to get the same results. We have taken the students, and of course we want them to graduate, and then when the other universities are also kind of trying to graduate, so you can't afford to kind of not make it more efficient in that system. Another issue is that there's external funding has been in rise, So in my university, it's 40–45% nowadays of the whole budget comes from competed research funding. We are, of course, successful one as we are research intensive, and it means that we are really dependent on the political game, also on how the external funding comes and whether you need money in kind, and when comes the limit that you can't take any more external money because you don't have the kind of a block grant money to use as a kind of a in-kind for the project. That's currently the big issue. And as you can understand, regional policy dominates politics. Even though we are, a lot of population is there in the south, near metropolitan area, actually the members of parliament from that area are perhaps only 15%, so it means that there are kind of a lot of people to defend all the other areas, and that's sometimes a little bit of a problem, especially for us in Helsinki. So big differences in size and encouragement in profiling. So yet then some words about collaboration. So on national level, what is interesting now is that the legislation allows us to own companies. So the universities own a lot of companies, but it means that we can also own universities of applied science. So now 9 Finnish universities have purchased the shares of universities of applied science, and then they build not only kind of a group structure for services and spin-outs, but also a group structure in the sense that you also have the dual system within your group. And that is now changing, obviously, also the national game. My university doesn't own universities of applied science because we want to be research on the research track, and we don't actually feel that it's our issue or agenda, but many of the universities in regional area, the smaller universities, they want to own the local University of Applied Science. So that's kind of a special character now in Finland currently ongoing. State obviously has always been organizing joint activities, and now of course with EU and CERN and so on, there are lots of collaborative activities in research field that come from the kind of national priorities and national discussions. That same applies now, of course, for innovation lab platforms, as everyone's going to R&D and seeing how the universities are more engaged with industry and kind of bringing patents and spin-outs and so on. So that area is also going, and it may be that we'll be touching the topic of university alliances, but that, of course, comes also from top down, even though we have ourselves committed to University Alliance. We are members in the Una Europa there. But then when I look at it from the institutional levels, because this was more kind of from the framework and from top down opportunities, but there's a lot of things happening from bottom up where the universities want to collaborate and want to do work together. So we have strategic partnerships, we have them with Aalto University in Helsinki region, but we have also kind of internationally several strategic partnerships. And with those, we typically try to, it's not kind of a signed paper and nothing happens, but it means that we both reserve then money for joint collaboration where researchers actually do research and so on. We have a lot of research institutions that we govern together and jointly, and they have almost all of them come from bottom up. So it's not so that the state would have said, but when we want to get stronger emphasis, then we work together, and then we hope to get also external money and state money to kind of those activities. So the state has been willing to finance joint efforts and joint research. We have a lot of consortia, obviously, I'm sure that's typical here also, and then we have a lot of service units and service companies. So we have a lot of our services in company form, which means that there's kind of a professional CEO and system, and then we have board of directors, and then therefore we also have a group steering. Some of those we organize together, so some of the companies we have established with other universities, and in some cases we have established it first on our own, and then we have attracted others also to join the activity, because it makes sense to be more efficient in service production. And then I don't go to spin-outs, because that's not really a big topic. I would have wanted to stop there, but Alex wanted me to say a few words about financial crisis. So this slide is not for you to read, apart from the red text there and one black one, which I point out later. So the red ones show that in Finland 2010 a big university reform happened, and at that time basically we were detached from the state and became independent, all the universities. It means that that initiated a lot of internal development that did not come from outside, but was made possible by the reform. The second pillar with the university cuts, it means that my university lost over 100 million euros of its annual budget. For the first year 50 million, and then the second and third 20 and 30 and 20, and then something more in the last one. So it means obviously that we had to rationalize a lot of activities. And now, therefore, I point out the one black one, there's the University Services 2016, and Alex may be referring to that. I don't know whether that's of interest, but in our case it means that we don't have faculty and department services, but we have only one university service, so we put all the 55 offices and the central administration together at that time, and also unfortunately lost 25% of our staff members, but we still are working and running okay. Finally, then, of course, comes the COVID and digitalization, and maybe also the war situations which are now impacting us. And that has now initiated a lot of new developments that are ongoing. I just wanted to show this slide so that you can always look at the universities, and everyone says that nothing's happening and changing in the university. And when I'm looking, at least my university I've been around all of those stages, and I can't say that universities are not changing. They are changing, and they are actually quite dynamic, even though in public often you hear the opposite. Of course, it means also that a lot of academics complain that where's my secretary and why isn't things the way they used to be. Something then to complete about the prizes paid. There was a situation when our university ranking, we were around 56 in Shanghai ranking, and we fell to 100 approximately. And now we're going up again, but it means that there was a lot of kind of a danger in academic activities, how to maintain the dynamics. Universities are really distrustful nowadays towards politicians, which is a problem in many ways, because we need them to understand our importance and also to fund us in the future. Then there is an inertia that comes with big shocks, and you have to deal it somehow. There's a lot of distrust towards the leadership and the boards also, and a lot of resistance to do anything new at all at the same time. So it takes a time to get over that. Then on the other hand, what I've seen is that we get a lot of efficiency. Nowadays, people understand much more about balance sheets, and financial literacy has increased because of the finance being much, much more important than it used to be. We do a lot of lobbying, meeting politicians and so on, trying to kind of convince the importance of the higher education sector. I see that the organizational flexibility has been increasing. There has been, as you saw in the previous slide, continuous development in service production, and it goes on also currently. And then I feel that this all has led to kind of a more strategic leadership in the university, and also at least demand to more strategic leadership, so that you're not only reacting, but you're also thinking about the future and the long-term perspective. So this was my presentation to start with, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Esa. Are there some questions to this presentation, to Finland, to Helsinki? I have one actually, if you don't mind, and you can listen while you're reorganizing your stay. You mentioned different times about the demographic issue, and also about the fact that there is always, or often, more often, even in the whole journey you presented as slide, more of the times a top-down approach in driving change, independent of the fact of this is a budget cut or a rule or a guideline to merge or whatever it is. But the fact are that the population density is typically close to the south part of your nation, and I'm sure that the policymaker is evaluating a lot of other dimensions as well, not only the higher education, development, and whatever we always say. So, what do you think it will happen? What's on the agenda of the policymaker nowadays? Expecting a 2030 situation in higher education system, because here you have specifically, based on the geopolitical international affairs, a specific situation on the border to Russia, and so all the little university there, and the population is going south. There is also an issue of sustainability to have the right person, researcher, whatever they might be. So is then the question of forcing again a change for additional merge to coordinate? This morning we heard that enabling factors like infrastructure, depending on the fact this is digitalization or innovation system, data management, that I assume that in the south it's easier to build up. You have the money to run this immediately faster in a working environment, ecosystem than you have in the south. But this could help also the little university in the north. Is this the point? Is this in the agenda? What's next?
Yes, well, first perhaps let me think. First of all, there is of course the issue of population and people and their own preferences. So there seems to be a tendency that in Finland also people don't want to live in the countryside and they don't want to live in small towns. They don't see these job opportunities, but they don't see the kind of the cultural offer that is in kind of a bigger entity. So that has been unavoidable to my understanding. What the higher education policy has been doing, it has been regional policy, because the idea has been that it would nevertheless, some of the students when they move from the metropolitan area to smaller towns to the eastern border or the north, that perhaps some of them would stay there. That's of course one of the wishes of the state. That's unclear whether that works, because it seems to be so that most of them come back to the south than where the work opportunities are. Nevertheless, that's one of the mechanisms that has been working all the time. Now with the Russian war and the big 1,300 kilometers border that we have with Russia, obviously has raised a lot of concern. What happens with the smaller towns and university towns in the close to the border if the towns and cities get empty of people? So there is, of course, a kind of a national security interest in that way, and therefore the government has been investing money in those regions. It has not been it has, of course, meant that they want to maintain and develop the universities there, but it has more or less been a big issue how to create permanent or long-term economic activity in that region, because if you have economic activity there, then you also have work opportunities, and then some of them would be staying. So there is kind of a new need to kind of do this, and then yet at the same time, if you look at the fragmented higher education system and the international competition, and if you want to be kind of in that, you can't have only fragmented small institutions, but you do need kind of a big institutions. and we have too few of them currently. So they're kind of a contracting trends there, maybe.
Thank you again, Esa. If colleagues, if you have questions, of course, feel free to add, because I saw that some of you take some notice, but maybe we can come up to those questions, linking them together at the end of the presentation. So the question I made to you, the gap between regional and national approaches that might be successful in one side or another, is a theme that will be discussed also with the next presentation of Cécile. She will talk about how in France they decided to drive large-scale innovation and excellence programs in the higher education sector, and she will point out, independent as she is now, also free to underline the critical aspect as well. So it's in the PDF file, you see? No. The same of Esa? Sorry. You have to change the tab. Yes, you have it. You change the tab here. So she will like to, she will highlight this kind of aspect as well, and then probably will conclude with some stimulating considerations as well. So thank you, Cécile.
Hello, it's very nice to be here talking to you today, especially about things I normally know a little bit about, which is always better than the speaking about things you don't know anything about, which happens in any manager's life. Okay, just some slides to try and remind you of the main aspects of the French system. French system is a very regulated system, even now, even if it's been a little bit deregulated, and based on a really Napoleonic system of administration, strong state regulation, and so on and so forth. The 80% you see on the slide is the public financing average. The rest is, so it's the block grant. The rest is about 4% fees. The fees are very low in France, except for international students now. And they are set by the state, by the government, each year. The rest being contracts with companies, European funds. Continuing education is a strong own resource, as we say. And also, and I'll come back to that, call for projects, public money, but call for projects. Okay, so a limited autonomy, but on the other hand, compared to some other countries in Europe, quite sustained financial efforts, except the last 2 years, as you can see. Well, there are issues about whether there's enough money or not enough money. There's never enough money, but still, we've had some money coming in, and not like in Finland, where you have had big cuts and that sort of things. With us, it has been growing until last year. And I'm not sure about next year. Nobody's sure about next year anyway in France. So... okay. Another thing about France is dual system, becoming a triangular system. So an elitist public sector, what we call grandes écoles, and selective courses with admission by competitive examination. Open universities. I remind you, for those who know France, the term university is reserved to public universities. I'm afraid Bocconi in France wouldn't be a university. It would be a grande école. Grande, yes, but not university. And which is quite new in France, an emerging private sector, which is now nearly 25% of the students, and fee-paying sector. So debates about fees can be discussed. Okay. In research too, a dual structure system with the universities having about as many researchers as national research organizations. They all work together in the same research units, which we call the Unité Mixte de Recherche, which is quite enriching but extremely complex with different IT systems, different statutory positions for the researchers, full-time researchers for CNRS, for example, or others, and half-time researchers, teacher researchers for universities. Usually they're lodged in university buildings, not in research buildings. So it's a bit complex. Plus, well, some issues, like in Italy, I guess, we have quite a lot of universities that are in the geography of France. You have them a little bit everywhere. Of course, a concentration in Paris, in the big metropolises, but also in small and medium cities. Difference with Italy might be that the percentage of people having higher education between 18 years old and 65 is nearing 50% of the population. I understand it's a bit less in Italy. Okay, but notwithstanding, France is a country of tennis players trying to play football, which is not very efficient, as you might know. We have a historical cooperation, which is quite strong on support functions. Mostly IT, Renater, Cines, AMU are all on IT, whether on infrastructure or development of management tools. Also on libraries. So we do have quite a lot of cooperation, coordination on the support services, and we are all, we being universities, are shareholders of these institutions. But, so there is quite a strong appropriation, and I'd say it works. Not getting into details, it works. And for example, we had our annual conference was about AI recently, and one of the things that helps us, French universities, to tackle issues with AI is that we have a very strong capacity of sharing servers. You know that with AI you need strong infrastructures, and we share infrastructure. The university in Brittany will use the capacities in Bordeaux when they're off, and so on and so forth. So that has been helping us quite recently in developing new things. Okay. But recently, the central government, so top-down, has also instituted centralized digital tools for admission and orientation. There is what is called Parcoursup, is an admission system, national admission system to get into first year of university or schools, or private and public. And we also have that for master admissions. So that allows students to have a view of what is available on the French territory, but it has had, it is a constraint on the autonomy of establishments, because when you have an admission system on masters, it means the individual university cannot do what it wants in terms of admissions, criteria and that sort of things. So it is a limitation on the autonomy of establishments, and has had perverse effects, in fact, and concentration of demand on the most prestigious institutions. People have been going to the most prestigious universities, which have thousands of applications to treat. And for example, in the Parisian region, the city center universities are just overwhelmed with the number of applications, and they're supposed to read all the files, you know. They don't. They use AI, but they're not allowed to, but they do. And the universities around Paris, some of them being really good, I'm not talking about Saclay, though, which is, have been seeing the number of applications going down. So some cooperation. But at the same time, not so much cooperation on core business mission, being fragmented research, researchers working together in labs, yes, but signing their articles and the publications separately, which is not very good for the visibility. So, in 2003, big shock, no French establishment in the top 50th. So it's like, you know, the Germans, when they had the pizza results, it was a shock. Well, for us, it was Shanghai. And therefore, the government decided a strong response to that. One which is the government at the time created an Investments for the Future program, which is called PIA, Programme d'Investissement d'Avenir. Well, at the end of the day, I was trying to count, 2010 to 2030, it's 77 billion euros. So it's a lot. Not all of it goes to universities, but a lot of it does go to universities and research. Industrial research too, but not only. And, but this is not, initiatives of excellence is not really original. I mean, you have them in Germany, you have them in some ways in the UK. What is more original in the European framework is the drive towards mergers. That is a specific trait of the French. The initial objective of IDEX initiatives were broad. Emergence of intensive research, universities, visibility in... but it quickly evolved towards a logic of concentration and mergers. And the first calls for projects encourage mergers. And when I say mergers, it was really getting from having 3 universities in a city into one, which means merging everything, support services, academic, okay. In some cases it did work, in some others didn't. So the government adopted a more flexible policy, but at the end of the day, still encouraged better coordination and increased visibility. At the end of the day, but that's my opinion, that's not an official opinion, the aims of that policy of mergers were international visibility. It was a success. From 0 in the 50th, first in Shanghai, if you take Shanghai as a success indicator, it is much better. I can't remember now because it changes every year, but there are a number of French universities now in Shanghai, to take only Shanghai. Budget optimization, which was in the mind of the technocrats, of which I'm part of, the idea that by merging you'd had budget optimization. As you can see, it's a no. At least it didn't happen yet. Academic synergy, yes, not always, but it was positive in some cases. So I took a positive example because I could talk for hours about negative examples, especially since I come from a city where it was a huge flop. Lots of time and money spent on things that didn't give anything. But Paris-Saclay is a very good example. And Paris-Saclay, Alex visited, and Paris-Saclay is in the outskirts of Paris. It's an urban campus, 3 different districts, 2 million square miles, developed over 600 hectares. Well, I'm going to go fast on that. But with 19 research institutions, 65,000 students, 16,000 researchers, and is always first, comes first in all the rankings for France. So 21% of French research, second research poll after Paris, and so on and so forth. But Saclay is a good example too, because there are various levels of integration. I'm looking at my notes, yeah. In research, it was a success. There's a single signature policy, grouping of research units, and it really had an impact, has an impact on the quality of the research or the management of technological platform, doctoral schools, all that. It's a success. And I think, well, we'll know more about it next year, but it is a success. Education, it's variable, because on Saclay you do have grandes écoles, selective access institutions, some are very prestigious, like École Normale Supérieure and so on, and traditional universities, which are, let's say, more open to access. So it's their competition, it's their cooperation. I don't have the answer. On innovation, I didn't write it here, but still, on the innovation, it was a success too. A number of startups were created and are still being created, so it's a success. On governance and support functions, still lots of work to do, especially in IT, because when you have many institutions with different IT systems that are connected, but the security is not ensured. Well, last year we had a huge cyber attack, and the admissions had to be done by, goose feathers and ink. And they're still recovering from it. I mean, I'm joking, but it wasn't a joke. It was really, and so on issues like cybersecurity, IT systems, there's a lot of work to do. Funding and evaluation, but all this was made possible by funding. They had, Paris-Saclay, okay, I was telling you about quite a lot of money put on call for projects by the government, but Paris-Saclay really got lots of that money. So, let's say that I couldn't really say Paris-Saclay is a single organization, but it's becoming one. We'll see next year, and the scoop is I am in the evaluating committee for Paris-Saclay next year, so I'll be able to tell you more. Budget economies, no, definitely not. At the national level, this merger, coordination, cooperation was a success on international readability. It's probably better for students, which after all are our customers, because there's more visibility, because if you are in a city like Marseille, you don't have 3 different diplomas for the same kind of discipline, improved readability, but hidden costs, no obvious budget savings at this time. Significant upgrade costs, because when you create cooperation, you create institutions to manage cooperation, and you don't always diminish the lower level, okay? And what's more, a 2-speed system, which is the universities that were the best in the call for projects are getting more money and more teams to prepare the call for projects, and the others have difficulties. So a 2-speed system, which in a country where we don't hesitate in having diverging objectives like excellence and competition on one side and equal opportunity and equal territorial opportunity on the other side, is considered as a problem. Some questions for the future, and I don't have the answers to those questions. Is competition a good thing or a bad thing? I tend to think it's a good thing, but it has to be regulated. Cooperation in France has been effective at the national level on some issues, but insufficient at the regional level, except for the main IDEX sites. And as someone who spent 12 years of my life in meetings on statutory issues and regulatory issues, trying to merge 5 universities and never managing to do it, I must say there are hidden costs in terms of work time of the amount of time spent on absolutely useless issues. But then I might be a bit biased because I come from a city where we were an IDEX, and then we lost the IDEX, and we never managed to cooperate. So it's not the case in all the big cities in France, but it's the case. It's interesting to see that this policy was a failure in Lyon, which is the second city after Paris, and in Toulouse, which is the third or fourth, depending how you count, city after Paris and Lyon. So, well, so I don't have the answers. What I know is it was a top-down policy, and in times of budgetary constraints, even in places where it was a success, if the academia is not convinced, it can still, in some places, it can still unravel in the next few years. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cécile. Questions from the audience? Actually, I have some questions, but I think that we come back after hearing the presentation of the Professor Lippiello. Just one curiosity. I'm actually wondering, in Italy, we are now in the upcoming months faced with new requirements with regards to the risk management processes relating to cybersecurity. So this is an European aspect, that's not only an Italian one. So you were talking about sharing of infrastructure, enabling factor, also services, centralized services for university. You mentioned IT specifically, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, we do have, well, there are many issues under that, but our national systems of cooperation in which we have consortia to develop management tools, HR, finance, and so on and so forth. And it works, but it means that this consortium develops applications and we use them, but it's not a common application. How could I say? It's putting money together so as to develop things cheaper, like school managing, student management tools and that sort of things.
Thanks. So, thank you again. The next presentation, could you please, do you have it already? Okay. As I said before, the sector in sharing services between universities is a national, regional, or local dimension is also a very critical point that we probably need to reinvent or reconsider. We will talk about later how long or how much that what so far differentiating dimensions should be taken into account in fostering the go-alone approach instead of a shared service approach. So, Geoff, please give us some examples of your context and let us understand what has been done so far in UK and from your individual institution as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Buongiorno, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. So, as Alex says, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the UK higher education system, and then I will spend a bit of time talking about shared services in the UK context as well. So what I've tried to do on this slide is capture some of the key data points for you around UK HE. So we're a sector of about 260 providers. They are the number of universities who are registered with the Universities UK, but as with all things data, it depends how you count them. And there's a national regulator who says we have more than 400 higher education providers. So we're quite a large system in the UK, nearly 3 million students, of which over 2 million are home students. 49% of the UK population by the age of 25 have been through the university system. So it's quite a mass education system, higher education system in the UK. Fewer students, sadly, from the EU now coming to the UK since Brexit, but pleasingly still some are coming, and large numbers of international students historically, but as I will say shortly, that's not a happy trend at the moment. The other key thing I want to put out on this slide is the highlighted in bold there, the sector as a whole generates £44 billion of income, but it spends £48.6 billion. So the maths there is obvious, I think. The sector is really challenged financially. Most of our income will come from tuition fees, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, and about £6 billion from funding bodies and £7 million from research. So there's a highly developed research and development ecosystem in the UK, as there are in all of our systems, I think, and we generally talk about every £1 investment in R&D in the UK generates £7 of economic value. So we are structured, I think, to compete and cooperate. The first challenge we face in the UK is there's a separation of policy at the national level. So we have two government departments, one the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, which sits over our research policy nationally, and then education sits under the Department for Education. So that immediately means that for the sector, there is a challenge because you are being pulled left by one department, right by another department. We also have regulators who work on behalf of government. The Office for Students is a sector regulator. It manages the providers within the sector, and we are a stratified sector. So there are public universities, there are private universities, and this regulator manages entry into the market of public and private regulators. So there are some similarities, I think, here to Cécile's presentation in France, where we have a lot of private sector providers, but we're probably a little bit more regulated in relation to those. The other key thing the Office for Students does is regulate around the tuition fee, and I've got a whole slide on that in a moment, because that's a particularly hot topic for the UK. And then there's the UKRI, which deploys £7 million of research funding. That's a split stream model, so that is delivered, about £2 billion of that goes through an allocation model, and a percentage is applied to all universities, and about £5 billion is competed for by the universities. Generally speaking, I characterise this as OFS encouraging competition and managing competition, but UKRI encouraging collaboration. So even at that level, you've got that tension between competition and cooperation. So briefly then on marketisation, this has been a long journey in the UK. We first introduced tuition fees in 1998 at only the £1,000 level. They have since increased to what is now £9,500. Two key points to say on that, though, I think. One is that these are not tuition fees that are paid up front by a student. Nearly all students will pay that through a government-backed loan that they then pay back to the government once they're in employment, and they have to be earning £25,000 a year before they have to pay that back. So that's the key point one there. The other key point is it's not kept pace with inflation. It's only gone up twice since 2012, but as I've given you some examples there at the bottom, inflation has gone up a whole lot more than that. The RPI in the UK has gone up 35%, gas and electricity in just 7 years, 140% or more. So it's been 10 years since that tuition fee met the cost of actually teaching the student. All of which leads to the current challenge, and these are some of the current headlines you'll see in the UK sector at the moment. The inflationary pressures, the reduction in public funding, fewer international students. There is something of a financial challenge in the sector, and 4 out of 10 universities are reporting financial deficits. So that takes you through, I hope, the kind of sector position and where we sit at the moment. So what's the sector doing then to respond to that? And I'll take some high-level points on that and then talk a little bit more about shared services specifically. So the Universities UK, which is the group of presidents of universities in the UK, have put together a transformation proposition which covers 7 key areas, and this is anticipating a new government white paper by the end of this year, which is going to introduce we think, some strategic review and reform in the sector. The two topics probably of most interest to this room are around the first two bullet points, so collaborative structures, and we've already heard quite a lot about that, I think, from Asa and Cécile today already. Secondly, sharing services and infrastructure, and that's the one I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to ignore the other things on this slide because they are all important, but there's only so many minutes we've got to talk to you today, I think. Okay, so shared services then in the UK. So this I've pulled mainly out of a report from an organisation called GISC, which is actually is a national shared service, and I'll say a bit more about that in the moment. Similar to the story that Cécile was saying, in the UK there is a long history actually of shared services, particularly at the national level. However, below that, the real challenge is scalability. And how do you get scalable shared services at the regional level or the local level? The other key dilemma around shared services is a lot of the national shared services are driven top-down, a lot of the regional local services are driven bottom-up, and there's a dilemma there and a challenge for the sector around which is the best approach. And again, I think that kind of top-down, bottom-up question has been a theme actually that's come out of quite a few of the talks already today. So the first question then is why bother with shared services? From a financial perspective, there was a study in the UK just over 10 years ago. This was actually in Scotland. There's an estimate that it can save you between 6 and 10% in your cost if you compare that to a lean in-house service. So the push now from Universities UK and from government is to think about shared services first in your mindset. And finding opportunities to realise savings through that, and think about that just internally, but also locally and regional in the areas where you are located. I think this requires a significant change in culture in UK HE. So we have some universities which are very traditional, research-intensive universities like my own. They're typically more public funded. And then you have other universities which are private, perhaps will operate with more agility. So I think the culture change that's needed across the sector is quite significant. I won't spend much time on this slide because I am conscious of time, but this one summarises some of the national shared services that we have in the UK. Some of these are similar to those that Cécile has already talked about, and touching on Alex's question about cybersecurity, for example, GISC does a lot of work at the national level in supporting university cybersecurity, resilience, and works with us a lot on that. We already in the UK have a national admissions service. This is organised and supported by all of the universities. And then lastly, there are a lot of reciprocal access arrangements. So this sits across library services and sports services. So typically, a UK student can access these services in any UK university campus to pretty much the same level, even though they're only going to be studying probably at one of those universities. So these are some examples of national shared services. If you then go to regional shared services, it gets a lot more fragmented, and there's a range of those on here which I've put up. I would describe a lot of these as back office services as opposed to front office student-facing services. I think in some ways that's because these are easier to implement and they don't damage the student, have the risk of damaging the student experience. What's quite interesting about some of these models is that they are all bottom-up. So the Purchasing Consortium in London now has over 100 members, nearly 100 members, and is managing over 100 framework agreements, so that those organisations can get value for money from suppliers. It's been going a long while, and it now supports organisations beyond higher education. Another example, which I just wanted to pull out on here, is the IT service desk example. So this is where one university is supporting IT support across 40 universities within its region. And that started out small, and then it grew and grew and grew, and is delivered through one university. You can see on all of these, it's taken quite a lot of time and years to get to these stages. Coming then to the local picture, I've put up 2 examples here, which are a bit newer, deliberately so. So the first one I'm just going to talk to you about briefly, I've put up because it's not a back office service. This is a front office service, thinking about how can universities in this area collaborate to deliver mental health services to support students. So staff are employed through our National Health Service in the UK, but they're located in the universities, and there are 4 universities now collaborating in this model to see if there's a way of delivering streamlined services collaboratively to students. And then the last example on here, Falmouth Exeter Plus. This is in the southwest of the UK, and this is where 2 universities have come together to create one campus. And they've set up a joint venture vehicle, so a wholly separate legal entity, to establish a new campus with estates, library services, etc. I think its setup is more on a greenfield site, so a bit more similar perhaps to the Cécile model, where you've got a geography that you can build something on a bit more easily than perhaps some other sites. Okay, and then just the last couple of slides from me, because I'm very conscious of time. I won't talk about this one very much, but there are a range of different operational models you can use to deliver shared services. Sometimes it might be one university servicing other universities, sometimes it's separate legal entities or collective legal entities, sometimes it's not-for-profits, sometimes you may just wish to work with a commercial third-party provider. When is it a good idea to create shared services or not create shared services? So these slides I think will be shared after the session today, so I'm not going to go through every single one on these slides, but just to pull out a couple for you. A key one of when to create shared services is definitely around scalability. So can you develop a shared service which has the potential to scale? If it can't scale, don't bother. Can it share risk? And I think the Falmouth example here is a really good example. Can your organisations come together to share risk and therefore be successful? And then on the maybe not question, I think the key one here is around complexity. If it's very, very complex with lots of integrations, lots of stakeholders, don't start there. Start small and then build to bigger complexity. And if your university is one that needs to stay agile, we all need to stay agile at some point, but agility can sometimes be harder to deliver in the short term through a shared service, but clearly in the long term, it can definitely do that. Lastly, very quickly, conditions for success. What have we learned in shared services in the UK? Start small. Generally speaking, bottom up is more successful than top down. You need some key leadership individuals who are absolutely committed to this within your university or your organisation, which is going to support success and drive it. You need to be thinking about specialisms and technical skills. Don't just choose something that everyone can do really well and cheaply and easily already. Got to have a strong business model, and usually it needs seed corn funding, so pump prime funding or some level of investment to get it going. And that, for me, is the key dilemma here between competition and collaboration, because whilst the UK sector is set up to compete, actually the reality is to collaborate on a lot of these things, including shared services, there's got to be collaboration. And even though we're set up to compete in a marketized sense, actually even in shared services, you often need public money to get them going in the short term. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Geoff. I'm sure all of you have some questions about this, but the slides, we will give them to the organizer so you can have access to all the slides we presented today. Professoressa Lippiello, last but not least, you have a topic that is probably the best known of our audience today, but you have the goal eventually to, if you want, I saw a lot of notes that you have taken so far, in summarizing and linking our experiences within the Next Generation EU program with all the experiences that we have heard today from the other speakers. And eventually, if we conclude, it's now 4:10. I think it takes another 20 minutes and then we are done. Of course, we are then open to a question and answer session at the end if you want. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alex. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me, and also Humane and CoDAU for inviting me to this session. Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio a tutti. Of course, I will not speak about the Italian system because it is not interesting for you. You know it very well. And I want to focus on two collaborative and competitive initiatives, which are the Recovery and Resilience Plan, and the other one is the European Alliances. So, as you know, the initiative promoted by the Italian National Recovery and Resilience Plan in higher education are oriented toward cooperation, but in practice, they also include strong competitive dynamics as well. And I would like to highlight the strengths and the weakness of these two initiatives. The policy design and funding goals encourage structural collaboration among universities, research centers, and business. And I want to mention the three main projects, which are the Extended Partnership, National Centers, and Innovation Ecosystems. But as you know, there are many other initiatives like digital infrastructures, transnational education programs, and many other projects. And one of the weaknesses, according to me, is that we got a lot of money for a very short period. So it was difficult to use in a fruitful way this money, this amount of money. So in this year, we have promoted inter-university networks, sharing resources, expertise, and research infrastructures, development of interdisciplinary projects on a regional innovation ecosystems, and national extended partnership, national center scale. So one of the limits is that these projects are national projects, and so far we don't have an international dimension in these projects. And this is why we should look for their sustainability in the future. So in order to promote integrated development, universities work together with local authorities, companies, and civil society to tackle shared challenges: ecological transition, digital transition, and social inclusion. And I think that the companies did not really understand the value of these projects on the one hand, and they didn't have enough time to understand the meaning and the positive meaning for them. And especially in our country where we have small and middle companies, they didn't see the real value of having, for instance, joint PhD, industrial PhD, because they are not so interested in recruiting researchers, not all of them at least. So this is just the geography of the national centers, innovation ecosystems, and the partnership, which are regional partnerships. So besides these three initiatives, we have joint training initiatives. As I said, industrial and innovative PhDs co-designed with private-public partners, which should be motors of industrial innovation and cooperation. The funding mechanism introduced clear elements of competition through selection process. So on the one hand, we had a spontaneous collaboration among universities. We had to create a new partnership among universities in the country, but on the other hand, only a limited number of partnerships and centers receive significant funding. So projects must demonstrate scientific excellence, management capacity, and socio-economic impact. Another limit is that in this year we have been working on parallel dimensions. One was the normal life dimension, the regular activities we have in the universities, and on the other hand, we had this money to manage these projects. So these are two different parallel dimensions which don't meet some way, at least so far. So what are the challenges and risks? Institutions with stronger project design skill and strategic alliances are at advantage. However, there is a risk of widening the gap between well-established universities, so mostly big universities, and smaller or peripheral universities. Collaboration is incentivized, but not only among actors that can demonstrate the capacity to excel and form effective systems. Universities are encouraged to build strategic alliances, but also to compete for funding, recognition, and leadership. So where do cooperation and competition meet? It is not clear. So the logic of PNRR reflects a broader European logic similar to Horizon Europe, collaborating in order to compete more effectively on a global scale. So on the good dimension of this kind of collaboration, new collaboration, is that we are obliged to reflect on our excellencies, on our strengths, and also on our weaknesses. So let's go to the European alliances, which can play a fundamental role in funding common objectives and strategy to advance collaborative research and education at continental level, and to strengthen the cooperation, foster innovation, and address shared challenges across the higher education landscape. So I think in the future, in order to give sustainability either to the PNRR and to European alliances, we should find some synergies between these two dimensions. So what are the role of European alliances? Universities collaborating across borders to pool resources, expertise, and infrastructures, research networks, collaborative research and educational models, and share platforms for innovation, enhance mobility, inclusivity while respecting institutional diversity, preparing students and staff not only as professionals but as European citizens. So one of the aim is to promote our institution as European institutions. And of course, contributing to the European Green Deal and digital transformation through education and research. Thank you for your attention. And maybe we can discuss on the weakness and more on the strengths of these two innovative experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. So we had the first round. Are there finally some questions from the audience? Oh, okay. You want to come out, or then Riccardo later on if you want?
Hello, good afternoon. Very interesting presentation. Thank you. I have a question on tuition fees. So it's a component of your presentation, but so clearly in your case, tuition fees represent more than half of the budget of UK institutions, and my question is, what do you think your universities are going to do to compensate the difference, since they don't cover the cost of education any longer? Are you going to hire fees again for international students, for local students? So your policies on tuition fees. And for those of you that have introduced tuition fees for international students, so Finland since I think maybe 13 years or so, and even France has introduced tuition fees for international students. I would like to understand after these years what are the results, what has been the impact, if you're happy in terms of more quality of the students, or are there any suggestions? Because in our case, universities are free to do so, but very few universities have decided to hire the fees for non-European students.
Thank you. Should we collect some more questions and then we answer all them together? Riccardo?
Yeah, I was somehow in line with the previous question. I mean, we have different systems. Basically, UK is mostly supported by students and mostly by international students in the previous years, so that is now a challenge. On the other side, they were both on mostly national type of domestic approach funded by the state. In Italy, we are definitely on two levels. One is the state-owned universities with, of course, a large portion which is state-funded, and the private universities who are on fees and trying to internationalize more. So what I see is we continue to be on national levels in any case with different approaches. I do believe that unless we start to think more on a European base, now UK is no more there, but still European Union is important. The example of this morning that UNI's director was telling us, I think is fundamental. We mostly need to have more common approaches at European level. Unfortunately, this is politically very, very difficult, but I think we will not be able to compete, and we compete with the US on one side, with China and Asia on the other side, unless we become more unique as a European approach to the university and to the research. So this is my point, so I just wanted to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks. So who want to start first? It's up to you. Isa?
I could perhaps start from the last one, from the kind of a global view and the European and quite nationalistic way of looking at the systems. I think that, at least this is now my kind of a view from my university collaborating in League of European Research Universities and Una Europa, the University Alliance, working together with EUA, and now we just joined Universitas 21. And I think that there is a kind of a major shift ongoing in the way that institutions are more and more engaged internationally. We used to think perhaps that it's kind of a students that are moving around, but I think that these alliances and ways to collaborate are kind of also part of the answer in this context. At the same time, I must say that when we are in charge of the administration and internally how the organization is running, we do have to kind of look at the costs and benefits of all the activities when we are working together, when we are having these shared services, but also when we are internally being operational. So I think that at least our case has shown me that universities are actually, I should not say this perhaps aloud, but I still say that universities are actually quite lazy to look at the cost efficiency of their own activities. And now when we are doing these external collaborations, we do have actually a little bit of difficulty of kind of saying whether it's worthwhile doing it and spending the money that we do. We of course do it when we get it extra, but actually in many times the extra money is there only for a short time, and we do have to think about the long-term running costs of collaboration. Also in all of these university alliances, it's not clear that the European Union will be kind of paying for example, the European degree costs when we have those. We do have to kind of find a way to embed it into what we are doing. And that's perhaps what I wanted to say at the moment. Thank you.
Geoff?
Thank you, Alex. Perhaps if I take the fees question and just try and cover some of that. So in the UK context, what are we thinking about the future around tuition fees? So I think the sector is hoping that the government will endorse some inflationary-linked increases to the tuition fee, which would be helpful. But clearly that will never catch up on the kind of 15 years of underinvestment in the tuition fee. So we need to think beyond that. An interesting thing about the UK tuition fee at the moment is that although it was introduced to marketise the sector, pretty much everybody charges the same fee. So by definition, we haven't really marketised the sector. What is being discussed by government now in the UK is whether to link the fee to quality. So whether the quality of your teaching allows you to charge more for your tuition fee than other universities. And the UK, where the UK is quite marketised, is through league tables and ranking systems, and students choose their university really quite often based not only on their course and the geographical location of that course, but often on where does the university rank in the league table. So there's something around quality, I think. Secondly, I would say I think there's definitely lots of discussion in the sector about different operating model or different business models for the sector. It's interesting hearing about the process they've been through in Finland in rationalising and consolidating the sector to a smaller number of institutions. I can imagine that will be a future in the UK sector. Only 2 weeks ago, there was an announcement of a new so-called super university, which is going to be created in southeast London and Kent in the southeast of England. And that is 2 universities merging together. So I think that will be another response we see. The third response I think we will see, and this actually I think we'll probably see everywhere as the years roll by, is the traditional model of delivering education, I think, will change. And when we talk to our students, the traditional seminar, lecture, laboratory session in a room, I think is increasingly challenged by students, and thinking about how we deliver education differently using digital technology, delivering parts of degrees in partnership with other universities. I think there's a very different future there actually, which then allow the tuition fee to become financially sustainable because you're delivering in a different way. I hope that gives some thoughts.
Very interesting, Geoff, and especially the aspect of the quality of education. Then probably you moved the issue to how to measure this quality, but that's another story. Let's keep it there somewhere. Professoressa?
I think it's a good point, what you raised, but we have too many differences in universities in Europe, and we have some problems to solve in Italy, like the problem of reputation. We don't have a very good agency for promoting our universities, so this is a problem of communicating our results. I see Dora laughing, smiling, and we talked about this. And so first of all, we should solve this problem, how to communicate good practices, because this morning you heard about Italian good practices, Italian good students, Italian good scholars, but the world around us don't always know about this. We don't communicate enough. We don't communicate as a system. And in European practices, you were mentioning European alliances. It is not clear what's going on because there is a tension between those European universities which are in alliances and those European universities which are not. And they ask for more funding. You know, in EUA we discussed about this. And more than 50% of the European universities are not in the alliances. And now the European Commission say that also in Turin a few days ago, they said they want to invest more on the skills, on the universities, European alliances, but for the time being, they will invest on Erasmus+, because Erasmus+ is for all European universities. So I think we in Italy have to solve the problem of international communication, first of all, reputation, rankings, because if we don't do good communication of ourselves, we don't grow in ranking. And we also must have a strategy of internationalization, because the countries where we attract students from now are very difficult countries. So we must design a strategy of international relations, what we want to do. And also there is a very geopolitical situation, as you all know, and all countries in the world are trying to keep their students in their countries because the demographic problem is a world problem. Even China, where many students come from China in UK, they prefer UK universities and American universities, but now there are less Chinese students traveling. Why? Because they try to build their internationalization at home, and they try to attract our students, European students in their country, and students from Southeast Asia. So the world is very complicated, and we should work together in Italy because we have 85 universities, because there is space for everybody if we have a common strategy, which we don't have yet.
Pretty much right, though. You want to add difficult after this? You want to add something, Cécile?
Yes. Yes, you'll be. I said no, but no, it's yes. This question of internationalization, I think, has been, we've got to go back to basics. What are we there for? We're there to provide a good level of education to our citizens and a good level of research, never forget research. And at the beginning, when we talked, at the beginning 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when we talked about internationalization in continental countries which had a non-industrial view of things, I'd say. It was because it was good for opening the minds to have this. And little by little, it has become, including in our countries, an issue about how many international students can we have because they pay more. And we see now with the British example, but you can go to Canada, it's even worse than in your country. Australia is not so good either, and the US either. That once internationalization becomes an industrial issue in terms of revenue, you lose sight of what you're there for. And at the end of the day, well, in France, we are also trying to attract international students and doing blah, blah, blah. And it's been coming up, but we have, I think, now more than 400,000 international students. But back to basics. We're here first to provide to our students. And I'm not being nationalistic. I mean, it's just that when you lose sight of what you're there for, you have a problem. So that's what I wanted to say on that issue. Sorry.
Thanks, Cécile. You have just another 2 minutes, because I would like to close the panel of today in bringing up the last consideration. It's not actually really a question, because it's probably a question which is difficult to have or identify an answer so far. But let's be honest. Most of the programs and the case studies presented today have a common factor, which is actually running a top-down approach most of the times. Funding on one hand, and on the other side, conditions, requirements, time constraints. But it's also because the policymakers has a time. There's a time issue. How long does a journey such that a large-scale innovation program should last? Do we have the decision maker time to support this, or as it happens in reality, policymakers would like to make a change within their mandate, and so they are forcing you to run enormous changes in a few years, as you, Professor, said in our Italian case so far in the PNRR project. So if we sum up with some lesson learned from all these examples, who is actually supposed to run the show, ideally, let's say? Should it come again up, top down, or should we try to balance that with, as Geoff, for example, says in some shared services initiatives, also bottom up? Because the lasting changes cannot be forced top down. They should have a different balances. And the experience we have, doesn't matter if you talk about alliances, it doesn't matter if you talk large-scale innovation programs or even changes defined by law, right? I don't know if this is the right way. Of course, there is a time constraint that we all I think understand. I don't know if we, as a senior manager, or from our institutions, or from the CRUI, or from the national representation from our higher education sector, are in the position to bring up those aspects to the politicians and trying to negotiate a different approach. Because I think not only this afternoon, but also in the presentation of this morning and yesterday, and even though what the ministry said, the Abbessa Bernini said yesterday, it's time to change the approach totally. Just a short comment, very, very short from each of you, if you like, or if not, it's the same. But that's, I think, a critical point that we're trying to address somehow. You want to start, Cécile?
Well, both. In French, we say les deux mon général. Both. But just an anecdote. Lots of this merger policy I was talking about has been imposed by the top, by the ministry, and not even by the ministers themselves, but by the technocracy. What happened is in lots of universities, and as ex-head of administration, I'm going to talk as that, the management agreed with that policy. I mean, us managers, we thought, yeah, it's a good thing to rationalize support services, to rationalize training careers, etc., etc. What happened in a system, it's not the case everywhere, but in a system like in Italy, our rectors, president, whatever the name they're elected. There was a rejection by the academic world. And in lots of universities, not everywhere, of course, but there was a rejection, and an improbable rector was elected, to use Italian terms, rector, and the head of administration was kicked out, because in our system it's possible, of course. So I guess it may happen. So at the end of the day, what has worked in my country is issues where the academic world was convinced there was something to gain. And who were the drivers? It was the researchers, not the training, the people who were more specialized on training. Well, they are teacher researchers, of course, they're both. But it was the research world who was the driver. So where it did work was where there was a strong research culture. Because for research, you need big infrastructure, you need cooperation on the management of technological platforms, you need that sort of things. And so you need to, if you are in the ministry, you have to convince the researcher first, the managers too, but they're usually convinced easily. And, well, the training world comes after that. But so when it worked because of that. Hasn't worked everywhere, but...
Thank you. About top-down versus bottom-up initiative, I think we should find the right balance between these two dimensions. Too much bottom-up lasts too long. You have to wait for the decision of everybody. Sometimes they don't have a clear idea of what is going on. So too much bottom-up doesn't work. And top-down, only top-down also doesn't work because, for instance, European alliances are top-down initiative, as you know, and they should be processes throughout the whole university system. So governance, higher education, and also research. But people don't recognize that these are priorities over other European or international collaborations. So not everybody is happy to join this initiative because it is a top-down initiative. So I think we should have a balance. And also, since these two initiatives, the PNRR and also the European alliances, have taught us to collaborate, and they are for interdisciplinary project, interdisciplinary research. We have to change our law, because in the evaluation system, interdisciplinarity, no, doesn't work. We are valued according to our research results in our specific sector, right? So our colleagues are not incentivized to work on interdisciplinary basis.
Thank you. So I sort of agree with both my two colleagues in that I think some kind of hybrid approach is inevitably the way to go, Alex. But I think what I would observe is universities have been around in many cases for centuries. They are outstandingly successful organisations who know how to teach students, who know how to do research, and they usually outlive lots and lots of government policies which can come and go, as you've said. So I think, you know, I guess to be succinct about it, I think we need a more confident sector of higher education in Europe, which is more comfortable in its own skin and goes back to its roots around research collaboration, actually, which is where I agree with Cécile. That's the root and the heart of collaboration, I think, for universities. And carving out that space and having the autonomy to do that and building from that, I think is the way forward. Inevitably within some kind of national framework, but I am a bottom-up person, so I would hope the autonomy is given freedom within that framework.
Well, first, I would say that I think that, yeah, I'll say it directly. I think that universities are always only whining, and we are expecting everyone to kind of change their views, and then we don't change ours. I think that's one part of the problem. So to have a kind of a better position in the world and to have a brighter future, you have to start from yourself. So what can we do differently from what we have been doing earlier? And I see a lot of positive opportunities there. I also, of course, obviously see a lot of hostility towards political decision makers, which isn't helpful. It's understandable, but it's not helpful because the research is always funded from public sources. So what can we do apart from kind of having a little bit different attitude? We should be able to build dreams, long-term dreams, something that unites us, and something that promises also the society and decision makers something that they then want to promote. And in a way, I feel that our system now and the political system and all the uncertainties have led to a situation where we are only reacting all the time. And there is a kind of a way for us also to take a step back and look at the kind of a long-term dreams. And I mentioned now one thing that has changed, for example, in Finland, is that there has been, of course, this negative cutting issue as the country and the government is in debt and they don't have the finances in balance. However, we have been able to, the sector, to sell the idea that R&D expenditure should be 4% of the GDPR, and the politicians have actually, from all the parties, agreed to a new University Act where the government is every year investing more in R&D. And that did not happen so that politicians would have just invented it. It happened with the sector basically working together and working in long term. And then at some point we realized that the act, R&D Expenditure Act, or increasing the expenditure, was passed in Parliament, and all the parties agreed, And now we've seen that the first governments, even when they are cutting money from everywhere else, they are at the same time investing in research. So this would be my formula. Thank you.
So thank you, Esa, and all of you for your thoughts. So as we come to an end, finally, I would like to thank you for your attention, your patience, and help me to give a big applause to the speakers today. And now we prepare to dinner. Okay. Have fun for dinner tonight.
Ciao, grazie Alex. Thank you.